I'm 34, and I ghosted my fiancée, who is 33. It started after she asked for a temporary open relationship before our wedding. When I said no, she cheated. I've rewritten this story several times trying to shorten it, but our history goes way back since we were kids. I'm looking for advice on what to do when I get home in 2 days. I'm changing all the names, obviously. Sorry for the length of this monster. Jen and I had been friends since childhood. Our parents were lifelong friends too. We grew up together and started dating as teenagers. It was almost expected by our families. They had more plans for us than we did. When I was pursuing my master's degree, I had to move to another city, while Jen stayed in our hometown working on her nursing degree. After a year of a long-distance relationship, we decided to stay friends instead of putting pressure on ourselves with a relationship. We both remained best friends and dated other people. It was strange because we both always knew this was temporary, and eventually we'd end up back together. I graduated and stayed in the city where I earned my master's and began working. In my field, I waited for a transfer back to my hometown, and when I got it, I was thrilled. Jen was in a long-term relationship with a nice guy, but I always felt he was uneasy about our friendship. I understood the vibe and stepped back, out of respect. Although Jen and I would still talk several times a year, my boss and mentor, Paul, 44, was a great guy, and we became close friends. He taught me the ropes, and one day, he came down from the ivory tower to talk to me. He told me about an open position in a foreign city for 2 years that would be advertised soon. The money wasn't huge, but all expenses like rent, hotel, and travel costs were covered. Basically, I would be based in Tokyo and travel occasionally to other Asian cities for short periods. I thought about it and talked it over with friends and family. Paul said it was a tough position, but a great chance to prove myself and climb the career ladder. I figured, why not? I could save most of my salary and gain valuable experience. Paul said he'd speak to the big boss and recommend me if I wanted it. He mentioned he had done something similar years ago, which helped his career. So off I went. The first year was rough, adjusting to the culture and social rules not only in Japan but also in the other countries I visited for work. One thing that surprised me was how available women were everywhere I went. They loved foreigners. I got to enjoy some of the pleasures of the Orient. These weren't poor women. Most were well. I had many friends with benefits, and I made it clear to all of them that I wasn't interested in anything long-term or marriage since I was only there temporarily. I ended up staying 2 more years. Paul would visit several times a year, either on vacation or to oversee work. I admit we had some wild times in a few cities, like Angeles City in the Philippines and a few others. When my contract ended, I went back home and put a nice down payment on a house just outside the city. After living in a metropolis of 37 million, I needed some space. I was home for a month, and while visiting my parents, Jen was there. She and the other guy had broken up a year ago, and we started talking more seriously. Even though we had kept in touch over the years, we started dating again. I held off on having sex as much as I wanted because I was really afraid of what might happen. I had developed an addiction to having various partners while in Asia, and was trying to control that desire before Jen and I got serious. I mean, everyone, including Jen, knew I dated. But on social media, there were occasional photos of me with different women. My mother called me a player a few times, and to be honest, it stung. Now is when things start to fall apart. Jen and I slept together, and to put it bluntly, she was very surprised. She said I was different and had never been like that before. She meant it as a compliment. I had gained a lot of experience, to say the least. She asked me some questions, and I admit I didn't tell her everything. I didn't reveal the exact number, because even if it was divided by 3, it was scary. I had no doubt that I was faithful to her, and could continue to be. Yet, the seed I inadvertently planted that night would later grow into serious problems we never expected, of course. Our families were thrilled we were together. It was always supposed to be this way. We were doing great, and after talking with her parents, I proposed. She moved in, and everything seemed perfect. There were a few things I thought were red flags, like her asking if I was happy with her. Fast forward to December 2019. The wedding was planned for June 2020. We all know how 2020 turned out, don't we? Christmas was wonderful. And close to New Year's, we faced the first D-Day. I was sitting at the computer working when Jennifer's cousin Tammy, 32, walked in. We were looking through some wedding stuff. I'd known Tammy since we were kids, and we got along well. Jen asked if we could talk, and Tammy came into the living room and sat on the sofa. I chose to sit at the table to talk with Jen. She began by telling me not to interrupt or freak out, because she wanted to discuss something serious. She explained that she thought there were problems between us in the bedroom. She believed I wouldn't be satisfied with her, and that eventually I would cheat. She didn't want our future children or relationship to be destroyed if I strayed. At that moment, I thought, great, I'm about to get dumped. Just as I was thinking things couldn't get worse, I heard the infomercial guy in my head. But wait, there's more. Jen asked if I was willing to open the relationship so she could gain more experience and feel less insecure. She assured me I was the only man she ever loved, and that was why none of her previous relationships had ever led to marriage. I agreed with her on that point. I felt the same way. At first, I thought this was a joke and that she wasn't serious. This really couldn't be happening, right? Since this was a year and a half ago, I'll try my best to recall the main points. She said she would only be with random people, never anyone we knew or worked with. It wouldn't happen with the same person twice, and there would be no emotional connection. I was like, what the hell? When I realized she wasn't joking, I lost my breath. I didn't think it was possible for a heart to skip a beat and jump up into the center of my throat. I'm not an angry or violent person, but suddenly, I was yelling. I started to understand why Tammy was sitting close by. I shouted, Tammy, did you put her up to this? Tammy said she was just there to support Jen. Wow, thanks so much, Jen then said. I was free to do as I wished under the same rules. I said no. I was so furious at this point, and even writing this now, I'm raging. I said I didn't want one night stands. I wanted one person. She asked, who? I looked at Tammy, but not in the eyes, and said, I want to sleep with Tammy. That got a rise out of Jen. Tammy wasn't expecting that, and turned a bit red. Feeling uncomfortable, Jen said no. Tammy is family, and someone we both know, and it was gross for me, even to suggest it. I was totally in bizarro world. Where the hell did this come from? We argued back and forth for a while, and I told her if she went through with this, the relationship was over. I was completely against it. I loved her, and I believed we could work through anything together, but not this. I stormed off, grabbed my pillow, and went to the guest room. I could hear them downstairs for a bit, but couldn't catch what they were saying. It would have been a hilarious joke if the conversation hadn't lasted for an hour. I didn't sleep all night, and was a wreck at work the next day. Jen started 2 weeks of night shifts that day, so at least we wouldn't be home together for that time, and we could both cool down and revisit this later. Dinner was left in the fridge for me every day, with an I love you note. She texted frequently, but I kept my replies short. On Thursday night of the following week, during her night shift, I went to work on the computer and noticed an email notification on her account. It was a hotel reservation at a nice place close to my office. I know it well because I often go there with coworkers. I thought maybe she was supposed to be working but wanted to apologize or take me out for a night. The next morning, I waited for her text or call to invite me, but she only asked how my day was. Then she said she was happy she only had one more night of night shifts. How does she have one more night and a hotel reservation? I was sick with worry at work. I started looking through some dating sites, especially profiles without pictures. But I couldn't find anything. Paul popped in and asked if I wanted to go for lunch. He saw I was a mess and asked what was wrong. I told him. Paul's a hard man, a go-your-own-way type. But he'd always supported my relationship with Jen. He suggested we get lunch at some hotel restaurant and ice cream. No, not that place. He didn't know that part yet. We actually went for lunch, but I was sick to my stomach. I couldn't eat, or even drink, Paul said. I couldn't work like this, and that I could take as much leave as I needed, paid or unpaid. I told him I couldn't stay at my house anymore. I couldn't see her, and a part of me wanted to believe it wasn't true. I rushed home, packed as much of my stuff as I could into my car, and went back to the office. Paul suggested we stake out the hotel and wait for her to check in. I'm no detective, more like Inspector Closserbutt. I really had to know, so we set up in the lounge bar, and I started pounding drinks while waiting, still hoping this wasn't real. Around 6:30, Paul tapped me on the shoulder, and there she was at the front desk, not in uniform. I wanted to strangle her, scream, spit, anything. We waited 10 minutes after she got into the elevator. Then Paul and I walked to the front desk. I asked the receptionist to connect me to Jen's room. As soon as she answered, I started yelling into the phone, sounding confused. Jen, I told you if you did this, it would be over. I'm done, wedding's off. Relationship's over. Then I hung up and got the hell out of there. Now, where to go? I went back to Paul's place, and my phone started blowing up. The only person I'd called was my dad, and I explained in PG terms what happened and that I needed to leave town for a while. It wasn't up for discussion, and I felt bad for how I spoke to my old man. My phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. Everyone under the sun called me, and I didn't answer. I didn't know what to do. The only way I could describe how I felt was like walking around underwater. Paul mentioned some financial things I should handle to protect myself. I wasn't even thinking about that. The house, wedding loans, the car. We kept separate accounts, one for wedding expenses and one for house bills. I couldn't have cared less. The next day, I emailed Jen, saying this would be our last contact. I was leaving the city for a while, and the wedding and everything else was off. I called my dad back and talked with him at length. Though he was crushed, he understood I needed time and space. He said he still hoped we could work it out. 10 days later, I boarded a plane to Bali. I never replied to her or anyone else's messages or emails. I don't know if she left the hotel that night or stayed. I didn't care. Eventually, I landed in Bali, drowned myself in alcohol for the next month, and went offline except for keeping in touch with my dad and work. I didn't even care if I got fired. I wish I could say I enjoyed myself, but I was mostly just drunk. I felt a lot of rage, shame, and hatred over how things fell apart. I stayed in contact with Paul about my leave, and after 3 weeks, he asked if I could run back to Tokyo to handle some things. We talked about the new global virus, and I mentioned coming back to Canada to settle things there, since I heard rumors of potential lockdowns. I got to Tokyo on March 1st, and it felt good to get back to work, even if just a little. After hearing lockdowns were coming, Paul suggested I go back to Canada. But I said it was only going to be 30 or 60 days. I needed time to plan my next move. 30 to 60 days. Screw me. I ended up staying in Japan for another year before I got vaccinated. By then, I didn't really want to go home. My house was rented out. I was talking to family, but refused to hear any news about Jen. On September 21st, I got news that my dad had a heart attack but was doing well and would need a triple bypass. This surgery is serious, not as serious as it was 40 years ago, but I still wanted to see him. Just in case. I knew when I got home, things would probably turn into a mess, and I really didn't want that. I just wanted to see my folks and thank Paul for everything he had done for me. Even as selfish as I was, I knew I was going to have to see her. I had no idea how I'd feel or what I'd think. I'm so sorry for the length of this. I still left a lot out. Any advice, tips, or insults would be appreciated. I'm flying out in 4 hours and will land in about 24 hours. Update: after landing, I went to see my dad. He's looking good, and actually seems my dad's looking forward to surgery. Mum's doing well, but of course, I'm still worried. I spent almost the first 24 hours by his side, and I think we talked about everything under the sun but nothing heavy. I didn't want to stress him. I told him I was here for him, but I'm using this trip to reorganize my life, close some doors, and open new ones. On day 2, Paul and I met at a local spot near the office. Paul was already pouring drinks for himself. We talked back and forth about my dad, work, and he asked if I'd had any contact with Jen, which I said no. Then he told me the old man, the boss, wanted to see me, but considering my dad's situation, it could wait. I knew I was deep in it, and figured I might as well get it over with. I had a list of things to accomplish this month, and meeting Jen was on it. I entered the office for the first time in what felt like forever. Many faces were missing, a few new ones showed up, and the usual suspects were around. A few people nodded and greeted me. We headed to the old man's office. I'd never been there before. We walked in, and he motioned for us to sit down. I'd never spoken to the old man directly. He occasionally walked the floor, but people just parted like Moses parting the Red Sea. This is how the conversation went. Old man: good morning, gentlemen. This is a closed meeting, and anything discussed is private, blah blah blah. Then, he launched into a rant about responsibility and dedication, and, I have to admit, he made some good points. He looked at Paul and asked why they should keep me around. Paul said, he does great work. He saved accounts and brought in many new ones. Plus, we can't find anyone to do the job for the below-market salary we're paying him. What the heck, I thought. Then Paul and the old man started laughing maniacally, like that bar scene in Goodfellas. The old man wiped a tear from his eye and told Paul, "That's why you're the best VP I have. I make a decent salary, but seriously, I felt pretty slighted." The old man looked at me and leaned in. "Listen, kid, I know you had some problems with your woman. Let me give you some advice." He quoted some guy, can't remember the exact words, but the gist was, God gives women eyebrows, and they pluck them out and draw new ones. God gives a woman a face, and she paints a new one over it. God gives her breasts, and she buys a push-up bra. God gives her a figure, and she buys tight clothes to change it. If God himself can't please her, how can you? Brother, please don't kill yourself. That blew my mind a little. The old man looked at Paul. I trust you to handle this properly. Your mother will kill me if I have to fire you. And then it hit me there, related Paul, and I walked out, and I said, 20 below market salary. Really? He put his arm around me and said, don't worry about that, I've got you covered. So, am I getting fired or disciplined? No, dumbass, you're getting promoted. Then he put his arm around me and kissed me on the side of the head. You could have told me that beforehand, you jerk. Nah, this way was way funnier. I missed you, kid. Now let's go get wasted. It's 8:30 in the morning. Paul, who does that? I do. You still have a lot to learn about enjoying life. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. What else would I expect from someone who got liquored up before on sake, got into a fistfight with a monkey, and got his ass kicked at the hot springs in Japan? We did end up getting pretty drunk. We talked about work and what was coming next. We talked about Jen, and he told me I really needed to meet her and get closure. He said we both made stupid mistakes, but we're good people. Once I get closure, I'll be able to move forward without an emotional anchor holding me back. Then we can talk about my future employment, what I want to do, and where I want to go. So that was one thing checked off the list. At least I still had a job, and Dad was doing well. But Jen was still on my mind constantly. I've unblocked her on Facebook and scrolled through her profile to prepare myself for what was coming. I sent her a private message and asked if we could meet for dinner sometime soon. We only exchanged pleasantries and are meeting for dinner in the next few days. That will be my next update. Jen and I agreed to meet at a restaurant a few hours after she got off work. Going into this, I was afraid of two things: that my anger would remain and I'd act accordingly, or that my love for her would remain and I'd act accordingly. I was hoping to find a comfortable middle ground in the gray area. All my plans flew out the window. The moment she walked through the door, she looked wonderful. She smiled and walked over, and my stomach was in my throat. I wasn't this nervous even when we lost our virginity together. We shared a short, awkward hug, and I could smell my favorite perfume on her. Was she about to love bomb me, or play emotional tricks? Was she in another relationship and here to show me what I'd missed? No rings on her finger, not even the one I gave her. We talked about my dad first. She told me she always checked in on him when she was on shift, and assured me his surgeon for the upcoming bypass was one of the best. We circled around small talk. Her extreme workload during the pandemic and what I experienced during lockdown. In Tokyo, I was seriously on the verge of cracking. I can assure you, I was calm and collected on the outside, but falling apart underneath. I told myself I needed this to consolidate these feelings in order to move on. Finally, it seemed we were dancing around the elephant in the room for a painfully long time. She finally looked at me, and her face changed. The whole conversation, after that, is a blur. I will recount it as best I can. First, I want to tell you how sorry I am for what happened and for hurting you. Are you sorry you got caught, or actually sorry for how you hurt me? Of course, I'm sorry for what it did to you, to our lives, and our future. I threw it all away because of my insecurity. So, did you plan it because of your insecurity, or did you secretly want to punish me for the people I was with? When we weren't a couple, maybe both. But let me say this, any other man who was in my life before we were engaged, I never loved like I loved you. Tim, her ex before me, cheated on me because he said he could never compete with the feelings I had with you. We broke up for that reason. I didn't know this and, to be honest, never felt bad. He cheated. I never wanted you to know I was going to sleep with another man. I thought I could emotionally detach from it, and even if you found out, we could work through it like everything else we ever experienced before. You thought very wrong. It was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I didn't need you to be perfect or experienced. I just needed you to be mine. All of them, Shen, every single one could never add up to what I felt with you. But now, I wonder, was it a real feeling, or just the projection of the dream our family wanted, or the fantasy we expected? It started to get emotional, and Jen excused herself to the restroom to collect herself. We were in a good, medium-sized restaurant. With only a few tables occupied, Paul tagged along for support, as some of you suggested, and strategically placed himself in a sealed-off lounge. I looked over for some encouragement or a thumbs up, and he was having a rather animated conversation with two attractive women, laughing and using hand gestures, the whole 9 yards. He finally looked over, gave me a questioning thumbs up, and I knew everything was okay. Then he smiled, gave me the middle finger with a smirk, and went back to his extracurricular activities. This effing guy. Seriously. Jen came back, and we resumed. Is there anything you want to ask about that night? It can't be undone. It doesn't matter. Nothing happened. I wasn't even sure I could have done it. When you called the room, it scared the crap out of me. I raced down to the lobby, but you were already gone. It doesn't matter now. I'm not here to rehash the past. I want us to work on moving forward. Can you forgive me? Of course I can forgive you, and I do. You're not a horrible person. You just made a horrible series of choices which brought us here. It's not all your fault. I should have been more open and understanding of your worries as well. I was going through a cycle of emotions, from love, to anger, to regret. Part of me wanted to yell at her, and another part wanted to take her home and pretend this never happened. For the past few weeks, I've been watching these Reddit videos on YouTube, preparing myself for this conversation, and seeing men punishing. I had been watching those Reddit videos on YouTube, seeing men punish themselves more than their partners, who had done far worse than just cheating. I was determined not to be that kind of simp. I started looking at her, with the old man's words echoing in my mind: painted face, painted nails, and that tight-fitting dress. Do I even really know her? If this is her outward appearance, is her mind the same? Are all their minds like that? I hardened myself. What now? Is there a future for us? I want you to remember when we were kids, I said. When we were walking home from the park, and that vicious dog approached us. I got in front of you instinctively to protect you, to save you. The owner called the dog off. It took just seconds, but when you're 9, that's pretty scary. All these years later, I stood in front of you, loving you, and protecting you from whatever would come our way. But this time, when I stood there giving you everything I had, you stuck a knife in my back, just like the frog and the scorpion. That statement hit her like a bolt. She lowered her head and sobbed softly. I wasn't finished, I needed to get it out. I'm sorry. She took out the ring box and slid it across the table to me. I left it there. I don't want this. I'm pissed. Off that, you think I want to be sitting here with my heart pounding in my throat and you crying. I want to be home playing with the baby we would have by now. I can't remember anything that was said in the next few minutes. She began sobbing, holding her face in her hands. I've said some terrible things in my life, but that one takes the cake. I apologized and said I'd gone too far. It snapped me out of anger mode. The rest of the conversation calmed down, and after I'd blown off that steam, we actually had a normal talk just about life and the future. Since our parents are so close, and her mum and dad are like my second family, and vice versa, we talked about how we could coexist in this realm as friends. Reconciliation is not on the table. She got up to leave, and we hugged for a long time. I'm going to leave this here, and finish the rest tomorrow. It's been a long few days,